The words hung in the air, colder than the Spokane December outside the window. Dad, unfortunately, you won't be welcome here for Christmas this year. I, Arthur Finch, simply smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy, but one of sheer, unadulterated disbelief. 65 years on this earth, 38 of them spent raising the boy who now sat across from me on a leather couch I'd helped pay for, and this was the reward? The scent of Isabella's expensive vanilla candles suddenly felt cloying, suffocating. "I'm sorry, Michael," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "My hearing must be going in my old age. It sounded like you said I wasn't welcome for Christmas." He couldn't meet my eyes. His gaze was fixed on their marble coffee table, another piece of my generosity solidified into cold, hard stone. He shifted, his wedding ring catching the light from their obscenely large Christmas tree. "Isabella's parents are coming. They'd prefer a more intimate family setting this year." "They'd prefer," I repeated, letting the phrase hang between us. I looked around the living room, a museum of my financial demise. The silk curtains, the hardwood floors, the crown molding. Every nail, every brushstroke was a testament to a father's love, now thrown back in my face. "It's just easier this way, Dad," he mumbled, his shoulders slumping. "You know how they are about their traditions." "Do I?" I asked, my voice low. "Enlighten me. What traditions involve exiling the man who funded the very castle you're protecting?" Through the archway to the kitchen, I saw the professional-grade KitchenAid, a $2,000 monument to a week-long baking whim. My money, sitting unused, just like my chair at their table. "Where does your father spend Christmas, then?" I asked, the question quieter than I intended. Michael's face crumpled. "Maybe you could visit Uncle George, or we could do a big lunch the weekend after." The weekend after, as if Christmas was a dentist appointment that could be rescheduled. I stood, my knees protesting, a chronic reminder of a lifetime of labor, of carrying burdens. "I see," I said. "Dad, wait!" But I was already moving, past the gallery of family photos where my image grew smaller and more distant each year, past the coat closet overflowing with Isabella's designer jackets. My hand found the solid brass doorknob. I turned one last time. "Son, tell Isabella's parents, Merry Christmas." The winter air was a physical slap, a cleansing shock. I didn't look back. I slid into the worn driver's seat of my old sedan, a car I'd driven for 12 years because every spare penny had a new destination. The engine turned over with a faithful rumble. As I drove away from the twinkling lights of my son's neighborhood, a coldness settled in my chest that had nothing to do with the weather. It was the ice of a final, terrible clarity. The numbers began their relentless march in my mind. $2,500 every month for 5 years. My retirement, my security, my peace, all funneled into a house where I was a persona non grata. The heater whirred, fighting the chill. I stopped at a red light on Main Street, watching a young father struggle to fit a brightly wrapped bicycle into his station wagon. His kids danced around him, breath fogging in the air, their laughter muffled by the glass. I remembered those days, the chaotic, beautiful, exhausting days of building a family. A family that, it turned out, had an expiration date. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator, leaving the memory behind. The road ahead was dark. But for the first time in years, my path was perfectly, terribly clear.
The silence in my own home was a different creature than the one in Michael's. His was a judgmental, expensive silence. Mine was just empty. It was the silence of a house that had once echoed with the sounds of a family, now reduced to the lonely tick of the grandfather clock I'd inherited from my own father. I shrugged off my coat and went straight to the old oak desk in the den. It was here that Maria would do the bills, her brow furrowed in concentration. After she was gone, the task fell to me, a miserable monthly ritual that only highlighted the holes she'd left behind. I pulled the heavy bottom drawer open, the one with the stuck runner I'd never gotten around to fixing. Inside was a simple green filing folder, worn at the edges. I carried it to the kitchen table like it contained a contagious disease. With a deep breath, I opened it. The first sheet was the home equity loan statement, $45,000, the down payment for their starter home. The next was a credit card bill, the one I'd taken out for emergencies, $18,742.67 for the kitchen renovation. Isabella needed granite, you see. It was essential. Then came the bank statements, page after page, month after month, year after year, a relentless, automated bleed of $2,500 transferred every 15th like clockwork from my account to theirs. I found my calculator, the old one with the faded numbers. The clicks echoed in the quiet kitchen. Year 1, $30,000. Year 2, $30,000. Year 3, I'd stopped going to my weekly poker game with the guys that year. Year 4, I'd started buying my coffee in bulk cans instead of from the nice shop downtown. Year 5, I'd put off getting a new water heater, making do with lukewarm showers while they installed a rainfall showerhead in their guest bathroom. The final number glowed on the calculator's screen. $150,000, not including the down payment, not including the gifts for birthdays, the loans for vacations that were never repaid, the property taxes I'd covered when times were a little tight. $150,000. Maria's life insurance money, a chunk of my pension, the fund we'd started for future grandchildren. Grandchildren I was apparently not good enough to sit with at Christmas. A cold fury, clean and sharp, began to replace the hollow ache in my chest. This wasn't just ingratitude. This was financial malpractice. This was the systematic dismantling of a man's security by the very people he'd sought to protect. I gathered the papers, the evidence of my own foolish love. I didn't need a match. I needed a weapon. This wasn't just a ledger of expenses. It was a ledger of betrayal, and I intended to collect on every last cent, one way or another. The first step was to stop the bleeding immediately. The phone felt heavy in my hand. An old cordless model that had seen better days. The numbers on the keypad were worn smooth. How many calls had I made from this phone? Calls to doctors, to friends after Maria passed, to Michael to see how his week was going. This call was different. This call was the first shot in a war I didn't start but was now determined to finish. I dialed the number from my bank, a number I knew by heart. The automated system offered me options. I pressed 0 again and again until a human voice came on the line. Thank you for calling First National. This is Sarah. How can I provide you with excellent service today? Her voice was young, bright, efficient. I pictured a woman in her 20s, probably wearing a headset, maybe drinking a latte. A world away from my kitchen and my green folder of despair. Yes, hello, Sarah. I need to cancel an automatic transfer, please. Certainly, sir. I can help with that. May I have your full name and the last 4 digits of your Social Security number for verification? I gave her the information, my voice steady, surprising me. Thank you, Mr. Finch. I see your account here. And which transfer would you like to cancel? It's a monthly automatic transfer to Wells Fargo, $2,500. The account number ends in 7423. I heard the brisk clicking of keys. Okay, I have that pulled up. Initiated 5 years ago. And you'd like to cancel this effective immediately? I looked around my kitchen, at the linoleum floor curling at the edges, at the refrigerator that hummed too loudly, at the window above the sink where the putty was crumbling away. All the things I'd neglected, all the repairs I'd postponed, while my money polished their perfect life. Immediately, I confirmed, the word tasting like freedom. Consider it done, Mr. Finch. The recurring transfer has been canceled. You will not see another deduction. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, Sarah, I said, a genuine, weary smile touching my lips for the first time in weeks. No, that will be all. Thank you. I hung up the phone. The silence in the house was no longer empty. It was full of potential. I walked to the cupboard and took down a glass, and then I reached for the top shelf for the bottle of single malt scotch I'd been saving for a special occasion. A son's promotion, the birth of a grandchild. I poured 2 fingers of the amber liquid and raised the glass to Maria's photograph on the mantel. To us, my love, and to the son we raised. May he learn the value of $1 now that he has to earn his own. The scotch burned its way down my throat, a welcome heat. The deed was done. The Bank of Dad was officially closed for business.
The first few days after canceling the payment were the quietest I'd experienced since Maria's passing. It wasn't the empty silence of loneliness, but a profound, peaceful stillness. For the first time in 5 years, the financial sword that had been dangling over my head was gone. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been my unwelcome companion had vanished. I slept through the night for the first time in years. I made myself a proper breakfast: eggs, bacon, toast with real butter, and didn't calculate the cost against their mortgage. I even dug out my old toolbox and finally fixed the sticky drawer on my desk. The simple act of repair felt like a metaphor. I was fixing things, starting with myself. The silence from their end was deafening. No calls, no texts. It was as if a faucet had been turned off. I knew it couldn't last. The 15th of the month came and went. My phone remained silent. My bank account remained whole. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. They hadn't even noticed yet. The money had been so automatic, so expected, that its absence was beneath their notice. The arrogance was staggering. The call finally came on the morning of the 17th. Not from Michael, from Isabella. Her name flashed on my caller ID like a warning signal. I let it ring 4 times, then picked up. Arthur. Her voice was tight, clipped, dispensing with any pretense of a greeting. There seems to be an issue with the mortgage payment. It didn't go through. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Is that so? A pause. I could almost hear her brain recalculating. My lack of immediate concern wasn't part of her script. Yes, the bank sent an alert. There must have been a glitch with the automatic transfer. You need to call them and sort it out, today. We can't have a late payment on our record. Our record. The words were a masterpiece of unconscious entitlement. I'm afraid there's no glitch, Isabella, I said, my voice calm. I canceled the transfer. The silence on the other end was absolute. I pictured her in her perfect kitchen, her hand tightening around her phone, her carefully composed face finally showing a crack. You what? The words were a whisper of pure disbelief. I canceled it, I repeated, enunciating each word clearly. The automatic payment. I called the bank and canceled it. It's done. You can't do that. The shock gave way to a sharp, rising fury. "Arthur, what are you thinking? The payment is due. This is irresponsible. You need to fix this immediately." "Isabella," I said, my tone shifting from calm to cold steel, "let me be perfectly clear. I am not your banker. I am not your ATM. The payment is your responsibility. It's your mortgage. You need to fix it." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "After everything we've done for you? After we've included you in our lives? This is how you repay us? By jeopardizing our credit?" The rewrite of history was breathtaking. "Included me?" I gave a short, humorless laugh. "You told me I wasn't welcome in my own son's house for Christmas because my kind of cooking and conversation would embarrass you in front of your parents. That doesn't sound like inclusion. It sounds like conditional tolerance funded entirely by me. Those conditions are no longer being met." "This is about Christmas," she spat, her voice dripping with scorn. "You're throwing a tantrum over a simple family decision?" "No, my dear," I said, my voice dropping to a low, cold register that made her go quiet. "This is not a tantrum. This is a consequence. You mistook my generosity for weakness. That was your first error. Your second was telling me my wife knew her place. There is no coming back from that. Consider the Bank of Arthur permanently closed." I ended the call before she could respond. My hand was steady. The old familiar ache of guilt was nowhere to be found. In its place was something solid and unyielding: resolve. The peace was broken. The war was now officially on.
The calm after my call with Isabella lasted approximately 3 hours. That's when the bombardment began. My phone became a relentless instrument of siege. Calls from Michael, from Isabella, from numbers I didn't recognize, likely her parents. I let them all go to voicemail. I poured a fresh cup of coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and listened to the messages as they populated my inbox. It was like listening to the 5 stages of grief play out in real time. First, anger. Isabella's first message was a masterpiece of hissed fury. "Arthur, you call me back this instant. This is unacceptable. You have no right to do this. We will be ruined." Then negotiation. Michael's voice, strained and confused. "Dad? Hey, Izzy's really upset. Look, I'm sure this is all a big misunderstanding about Christmas. We can talk about it, okay? Just call me back. We need to figure out this payment thing." Then more anger, laced with threat. Isabella again. "If you don't reverse this, my father will hear about this. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Finally, a new voice, cold, cultured, and dripping with condescension. "Mr. Finch, this is Cody Jenkins. I think we need to have a conversation. My daughter is understandably distraught. This financial terrorism is beneath a man of your age. Return my call." Financial terrorism. I actually chuckled. The dramatics were astounding. I deleted the messages one by one. They wanted a conversation. They were about to get a lesson. I knew what was coming next. People like Cody Jenkins don't ask, they command. And when they're ignored, they don't get sad, they get even. 2 days later, it arrived. I was reading the newspaper on my front porch, enjoying the crisp air, when the mail truck pulled up. Along with the usual bills and flyers was a thick, cream-colored envelope. The return address was a law firm downtown, Jenkins, Whitmore, and Sterling. My heart didn't flutter. My hands didn't shake. I felt a strange sense of anticipation. I took it inside, slid it open with my thumb, and pulled out the heavy linen paper. It was a letter from one of their junior partners. It was full of phrases like breach of oral contract, detrimental reliance, and promissory estoppel. It claimed that my family had reasonably relied on my continuing financial contributions and that my sudden cessation constituted an actionable injury. It demanded I immediately reinstate the payments and pay a penalty for the stress and inconvenience caused. It was a bluff, a scare tactic written on expensive stationery. I read it twice. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I laughed, a real, deep, from-the-belly laugh that echoed through my quiet house. They'd sent a lawyer after me. They thought I was some frightened old man who would crumple at a sternly worded letter. They had no idea who they were truly dealing with. I wasn't just Arthur Finch, the generous father. I was Arthur Finch, who'd built a successful plumbing supply business from the ground up. I'd negotiated with union reps, faced down bankruptcies, and outmaneuvered competitors twice as shrewd as Cody Jenkins. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in its envelope. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't need one. Not yet. I had something better. I had the truth, and I had a plan. The first shot had been fired, not by me, but by them, and it had missed spectacularly. Now it was my turn to take aim.
The lawyer letter had been a warning shot across my bow. I knew the main assault was coming. Men like Cody Jenkins don't fight fair. They fight dirty, using the weapons of their world, influence and reputation. It arrived on a Tuesday. My neighbor, old Ben from across the street, a good man who'd known Maria and me for 40 years, brought over my newspaper. His kind, wrinkled face was etched with concern. "Art," he said, handing me the folded Spokane Chronicle, There's something in here you ought to see." I thanked him and took it inside. I didn't have to search for it. It was on page 3, in the local section. The headline was a masterpiece of malicious implication. "Local man accused of abandoning elderly couple in holiday travel chaos." And there I was, a grainy, unflattering photo from my company's website years ago, under the headline. My heart didn't sink. It hardened into a cold, dense stone of fury as I read. The article quoted distraught family members saying I had stranded Cody and Catherine Jenkins at the Spokane International Airport after promising to pick them up for a long-awaited family Christmas. It described them as frightened and vulnerable, forced to pay for an exorbitant last-minute taxi in dangerous, icy conditions. It mentioned my increasingly erratic behavior and unexplained financial decisions that had caused great concern for my son. The lies were so bold, so audacious, they were almost impressive. Icy conditions? It had been cloudy and 45 degrees. Long-awaited family Christmas? I'd been uninvited. Promised to pick them up? I'd been commanded. Cody had called in every favor. He'd used his banking connections to get this planted. This was his real weapon, not the law, but the court of public opinion. He was trying to publicly dismantle my character, to paint me as an unstable, cruel old man, thus justifying their treatment of me. I read it twice, my hand steady. Then I went to my desk. The green folder was now my war room. I began to compile my own evidence, not with anger, but with the meticulous precision of a general preparing for battle. I printed out bank statements, highlighting the 5 years of payments. I found the receipt from the home equity loan. I went on to Isabella's social media, a treasure trove of narcissistic evidence. I screenshotted every post about our beautiful home, our new kitchen, our holiday in Hawaii. I found the post from last week, so excited to host Christmas, #family tradition, #blessed. The hypocrisy was staggering. I printed it all. Then I found my trump card. Buried in my email archives was a message from Michael, sent 5 years ago. The subject line was, "Dad, down payment." The body read, "Izzy and I are so grateful. We'll never be able to repay you for this. This house will be a home for our whole family. Love you." A home for our whole family, until they decided I didn't fit the decor. I assembled it all into a packet, a story not of an erratic old man, but of a calculated, cruel betrayal. I made 12 copies, one for each guest at their Christmas Eve dinner. The newspaper had declared war. Little did they know they'd just handed me the blueprint for their own defeat. My invitation to Christmas dinner had been revoked, but I decided I'd be making an appearance anyway. It was time to give them a gift they'd never forget: the truth.
The morning of December 24th dawned, gray and still, a perfect Christmas Eve. The kind of morning Maria would have filled with the scent of baking cinnamon rolls and the sound of carols on the radio. The silence in my house was different today. It was charged, anticipatory. I laid my suit out on the bed, the navy blue one I'd worn to Michael's wedding and later to Maria's funeral. It was a suit for life's most significant ceremonies. Today qualified. I showered and shaved with deliberate care. The hot water a luxury I was finally allowing myself without guilt. Downstairs on my kitchen table, the 12 evidence packets were stacked neatly. I'd bought a proper briefcase at a secondhand store downtown. It felt weighty and significant in my hand, a tool of business, not a receptacle for a grieving man's loneliness. I dressed slowly, the wool of the suit familiar against my skin. I looked in the mirror. An old man looked back, but his eyes weren't tired anymore. They were clear, focused. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about restitution. It was about forcing them to see the cost of their arrogance, to stare at the ledger of their own greed. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Dad, please, can we talk? I'm sorry about the paper. I didn't know." I didn't reply. The time for talking was over. The time for showing had begun. At 6:30 p.m., I loaded the briefcase into my car. The streets of their neighborhood, Kendall Yards, were lined with expensive sedans and SUVs. Every house glowed with warm, festive light. Through their large front window, I could see the shadow of their monstrous Christmas tree, the silhouettes of people holding wine glasses. A scene of perfect holiday bliss, funded by my deferred dreams. I parked across the street and killed the engine. I sat there in the dark, watching. I saw Isabella flit past the window, playing the part of the elegant hostess. I saw Michael looking strained, adjusting his collar. I saw Cody Jenkins holding court, no doubt regaling the guests with a sanitized version of the airport ordeal. My hand went to the door handle. For a fleeting second, the old Arthur hesitated, the one who avoided confrontation, who sought peace at any cost, the one who would have done anything to keep his family intact. Then I thought of Maria. I thought of her working double shifts to help save for Michael's college. I thought of the second mortgage we had taken on this very house to give him a start. I thought of the quiet dignity with which she carried herself, a dignity Isabella had spat upon. The hesitation vanished. I got out of the car, briefcase in hand, and walked across the street. The air was cold and crisp. Their front door was predictably unlocked. Why lock out the world when you're at the top of it? I stepped inside. The heat and noise hit me first. The clinking of glasses, the peal of artificial laughter, the cloying scent of roasted meat and perfume.
I stood for a moment in the foyer, unseen, a ghost at their feast. And then I heard her. Catherine's voice, sharp and clear above the murmur. "Well, of course, darling. That's simply not how things are done. One must have standards." I walked into the dining room. 12 faces turned toward me. The conversation died mid-sentence. The laughter choked off. Isabella froze, a porcelain gravy boat in her hand, her face a mask of sheer, unadulterated horror. Michael's jaw went slack. Cody and Catherine looked as if they'd seen a specter. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm and steady, cutting through the stunned silence. "I hope you don't mind me dropping in. I brought contributions for the conversation." I set the briefcase on the sideboard with a definitive thud.
"Arthur!" Isabella finally gasped, finding her voice. It was a strangled, furious whisper. "What are you doing? Get out! Get out right now!" "In a moment," I said, unclasping the briefcase. "I believe your guests deserve to know the real host of tonight's festivities." I began moving around the long, ornate dining table, placing a thick packet of documents in front of each stunned guest. "A gift," I said calmly. "The true story of this house, of this Christmas, of the family you're breaking bread with." "Michael, do something!" Catherine hissed, her face pale with rage. But Michael just sat there, paralyzed, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrible understanding. An older gentleman in a tweed jacket, someone I didn't recognize, picked up his packet. "What is the meaning of this?" he asked, his voice deep and authoritative. "The meaning, sir," I said, stopping at the head of the table, "is $247,468. That's the total. The down payment." I tapped the packet in front of Cody. "The monthly mortgage payments for 5 years." I looked at Isabella. "The kitchen renovation, the new roof, the property taxes, the gifts that were never gifts, but subsidies for a lifestyle I was deemed too common to participate in." The room was utterly silent, except for the rustle of paper as people began to leaf through the documents. I saw their faces change as they comprehended the numbers, the dates, the sheer magnitude of it. "This is extraordinary," murmured a woman in a pearl necklace, staring at a highlighted bank statement. "Isabella," said the man in tweed, his voice now cold, "is this true?" It's out of context," Isabella stammered, her composure shattering. He wanted to help." "I did," I agreed. "I wanted to help my son and his wife. I did not offer to fund a lifestyle for people who then ban me from my own son's home because my conversation wasn't sophisticated enough. I did not offer to be slandered in the local newspaper when I finally said no more." I held up the printed copy of the Chronicle article. This is their gratitude. A story planted by Mr. Jenkins here, full of lies about icy conditions and abandonment. All because I refused to be their chauffeur after being told I wasn't good enough to sit at their table. I turned to Michael, my voice softening, though the pain was a fresh wound. "And you, son, you stood by and let it happen. You watched them bleed me dry, emotionally and financially, and you said nothing." Tears welled in his eyes. "Dad, he's unstable," Cody blustered, standing up, his face purple. "This is the behavior I was warning you about. Erratic, vindictive." "Vindictive?" I met his gaze, my own steady. "No, Mr. Jenkins, this is accountability. You confuse generosity with weakness. You mistook family loyalty for a bottomless ATM. You thought you could destroy my reputation because you have connections. But you forgot one thing." I looked around the table at the horrified, fascinated faces of their friends. "The truth has connections everywhere." I closed my empty briefcase. The sound echoed in the silent room. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one served on my dime." I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it, the sound of their perfect, polished world shattering into a million pieces behind me. It was the best Christmas music I had ever heard.
The cold night air outside was a baptism. It washed away the stifling heat of their hypocrisy, cleansing my lungs. I didn't hurry to my car. I walked slowly, deliberately, listening. For a moment there was only the crunch of my shoes on the frost-kissed pavement. Then it came. The sound of raised voices from inside the house, sharp and discordant, slicing through the elegant windows. It wasn't the warm murmur of dinner conversation anymore. It was the sound of a facade cracking. I sat in my car for a few minutes, the engine off, watching the show through the window. I saw Cody Jenkins on his feet, jabbing a finger in the air. I saw Catherine's hand fly to her mouth. I saw Isabella, her face contorted in a way her expensive moisturizers couldn't smooth, turning on her own father. And I saw Michael, my son, with his head in his hands. The sight didn't bring me joy. It brought a profound, weary sense of finality. The drive home was quiet. My hands were steady on the wheel. The part of me that had ached for a family Christmas was gone, cauterized. In its place was a hollow, peaceful silence. The voicemails began before I'd even unlocked my front door. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I poured 2 fingers of scotch, sat in my favorite armchair, and listened. The first was from Cody, sputtering with incoherent rage. "Ruined everything. You've destroyed my daughter's standing. I will see you in court for this, Finch. I will destroy you." The second was Catherine, her voice a venomous whisper. "You are a pathetic, bitter old man. You've embarrassed yourself and your son. You'll never see your family again." The third was Isabella, hysterical, shrieking about humiliation and betrayal. I deleted them, all of them. Then Michael's voice, broken. "Dad? Oh, God, Dad, what did you do? Everyone's leaving. They're all looking at us like we're monsters. Why would you do that?" His pain was a physical thing, even through the speaker. The old Arthur would have crumbled, would have rushed to fix it, to soothe him. The new Arthur just felt tired. He still didn't get it. He saw my act of truth-telling as the explosion, not the fuse his wife and in-laws had lit months ago. I didn't call back. There were no words left. The evidence had spoken for me. The next morning, I slept in. The world felt lighter. I read the paper. There was no follow-up article. The Chronicle's silence was louder than their lies had been. The Jenkins influence had its limits, it seemed, especially when faced with the threat of a very public, very messy truth. A week passed, then another. The calls trickled to a stop. The siege was over. They had retreated to lick their wounds and figure out how to pay their mortgage. The silence from their end was now complete, absolute. I started living my life, actually living it. I called my sister, Rosa, in Arizona. I hadn't spoken to her properly in years, always wrapped up in Michael's drama. "Artie," she'd said, her voice warm with surprise, "is everything okay?"
It is now, and I meant it. We talked for an hour. I told her everything. She didn't judge, she just listened, and at the end she said, "Well, it's about damn time. Those leeches. Come visit. The grandkids miss their Uncle Artie." I booked a flight for spring. I hired a guy to finally fix my porch light. I bought a new refrigerator that didn't sound like a dying animal. I started going to my old diner for breakfast on Tuesdays again, rejoining the world of the living. One afternoon, I was in the hardware store buying paint for the guest room when I ran into Ben, my neighbor. "Art," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You're looking well." "Feeling it, Ben." He lowered his voice. "Saw the paper a few weeks back. Nasty business. Didn't believe a word of it for what it's worth." "I know," I said. "Thank you." He nodded. "Heard through the grapevine. The son-in-law's family. Well, let's just say they're keeping a lower profile these days. Country club's not the same without Cody holding court." He gave me a wink. Good riddance. I finished my shopping and drove home. The house welcomed me back. It was no longer a monument to my solitude, but a sanctuary I was finally investing in. For me. The war was over. The battlefield was quiet. I had won my peace. But as I looked at the unopened can of paint, I knew one thing for certain. The victory was only complete if I built a new life on the ashes of the old one. And I was just getting started.
The official notice came in a stark, white envelope, a brutal contrast to the creamy linen of the lawyer's stationery. It was from Wells Fargo. Notice of intent to foreclose. It listed the property address, the missed payments, and the terrifyingly short window of time to make things right. I held it in my hands, this piece of paper that represented their impending doom. I felt no schadenfreude, no glee, just a cold, hard certainty. This was the inevitable consequence of a life built on sand. They had built their castle on my foundation, and now that it was gone, the whole structure was collapsing. My phone rang. It was Michael. This time I answered. "Dad!" His voice was flat, hollowed out, defeated. "You got it too, didn't you? The letter." I did. A long silence. I could hear the weight of the world in his breathing. What do I do? The question was a whisper, the sound of a lost little boy. It was the first honest thing he'd said to me in years. "What do people do, Michael?" I asked, not unkindly. "They get a second job. They sell things they can't afford. They downsize. They make hard choices." "Isabella, she can't." He trailed off, the unspoken words hanging between us. "She can't live without the life you provided." "Then Isabella will have to make a choice," I said, my voice firm. "She can stand by her husband and face reality, where she can cling to a fantasy that's bankrupting you both. But that choice is hers to make, and yours to live with. It is not mine to finance anymore." "They hate me," he whispered. "Their parents. After the dinner, the things they said, they blame you. For what you did." "What I did?" A flicker of the old anger sparked, but I doused it. He was still in the fog. "Michael, look at the letter in your hand. That is the result of their arrogance, their greed, their decision to bite the hand that fed them for 5 years. I merely stopped allowing myself to be eaten." He was crying now. Quiet, hopeless sobs. "I've lost everything." "No," I said softly. "You've lost a house you couldn't afford, and the respect of people whose respect was conditional on my money. You still have your health, you have a job, and you have a father who is still here, though you've done your best to push him away." The line was silent, except for his ragged breathing. "What happens now?" he finally asked. "Now," I said, "you grow up. You talk to the bank, you see if you can negotiate a short sale, you look for an apartment, You live within your means. It won't be the life Isabella wants. It will be the life you can actually afford. She'll leave me, he said, the terror evident in his voice. Then she was never yours to begin with, son. She was married to a lifestyle, and that lifestyle is over. I didn't tell him it would be okay. I didn't offer false comfort. The path ahead of him was hard and painful, but for the first time, it was real. It was his. I have to go, he mumbled. I know. I hung up. I looked at the foreclosure notice again, then filed it away in the green folder. It was no longer my business. It was theirs, a problem of their own making, requiring a solution of their own finding. My part in this act of the play was over. The curtain had fallen on the Bank of Arthur. The next show was all theirs.
The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the tense, waiting silence of before. It was the hollow, echoing silence after the storm has passed, leaving only wreckage behind. I went about my days. I painted the guest room a warm, buttery yellow. I had Rosa's grandchildren in mind. I started reading novels again, something I hadn't done for pleasure since Maria died. The world was slowly becoming my own. I heard things, of course. Spokane is a small town. Ben, my neighbor, was a reliable, if discreet, source of information. He'd stop by for a coffee, something he'd never done before the Christmas Eve dinner. Saw a for sale sign go up on their house, he mentioned one morning in late January, stirring sugar into his mug. Not a regular one of those short sale signs. Looks desperate. I just nodded. It was the logical, the only move. I felt no pleasure in it. It was simply the inevitable outcome of a mathematical equation they had ignored for too long. Income must exceed outflow. The next piece of news came a week later. Ran into young Michael at the grocery store, Ben said. Looked tired, thinner, buying generic brands. He saw me, looked right through me like he was ashamed. Didn't say a word. That one stung. A father's heart, no matter how hardened, still aches for his child's pain. But I knew any offer of help, any lifeline would only delay the necessary lesson. He had to feel the full weight of his choices. He had to understand the value of $1 he'd earned himself. Then, in early February, the unraveling reached its climax. My doorbell rang. It was a blustery, cold evening. I opened the door to find Michael standing there alone, his shoulders hunched against the wind, looking older than his years. The confidence, the polished sheen that Isabella had lacquered onto him was gone. In its place was the raw, uncertain man I remembered before her. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice rough. I stepped aside. He walked into the living room, his eyes taking in the new paint, the repaired bookshelf, the general sense of order and self-care. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking lost. "She left, Dad," he said finally, the words hanging in the warm air of my home. "She packed her bags last week and went back to Portland, to her parents." I gestured to the couch. He sat down heavily, like a marionette with its strings cut. She said she didn't sign up for this, for struggling, for mediocrity. He spat the word out like it was poison. She said I was a failure, that I couldn't even keep a roof over our heads. I sat in my armchair across from him, saying nothing, just listening, letting him pour out the poison. Her parents, they wouldn't even look at me. Cody said I'd failed to provide a suitable environment for his daughter. He gave a short, bitter laugh. A suitable environment. The same environment he was perfectly happy to have me provide when you were footing the bill. The irony was so thick you could taste it. He was finally seeing it. "What will you do?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. It was then I noticed he needed a haircut. Isabella would never have allowed him to look so unkempt. "The short sale is going through. The bank took a loss. I'll walk away with nothing. I found a small apartment, a studio, near my job." "Good," I said. It was a simple, honest word. It was good. It was real. "I'm sorry, Dad." The words were a whisper, but they filled the room. "I am so, so sorry. For everything. For letting them talk about you that way. For not standing up for Mom. For being so blind. I was flattered by them, by their world. I thought I was lucky." "I know, and I did. I understood the seduction of that world, the shiny allure of easy money and sophisticated approval." "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were clear for the first time in years. Haunted, but clear. "It's not the point, Michael," I said. "The point is what you do now, the man you become after the fall. That's the only thing that matters." We sat in silence for a long time. The grandfather clock ticked in the hall. It was a comfortable silence, not the angry, fraught kind we'd had for years. He stood up to leave. "I like the yellow," he said, nodding toward the guest room. "It's cheerful. Your Aunt Rosa is coming to visit in the spring. Her grandkids need a place to stay when they come." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Yeah, that's good." I walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, the cold air rushing in. "Dad?" "Yes, son?" "Would it be okay if I came by for coffee sometime? Just coffee." I looked at my boy, my foolish, fallible, finally humbled boy. "I'd like that," I said. He nodded, and then he was gone, walking into the cold night toward his small, real life. I closed the door. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like a page had been turned. A painful, necessary chapter was over. The next one was yet to be written.
The following Saturday morning, I was up with the sun, the habit of a lifetime, hard to break. I put the coffee on, the good, whole-bean Colombian I now bought without a second thought, and scrambled some eggs. The ritual was comforting. The kitchen smelled of percolation and possibility. At precisely 8 a.m., a hesitant knock sounded at the door. I opened it to find Michael standing there, holding a brown paper bag from the bakery downtown, the same one his mother had loved. "I didn't know if you had anything," he said, offering the bag. "They had those almond croissants you like." It was a peace offering, small, simple, and utterly sincere. "Come in," I said, taking the bag. "Coffee's just ready." He stepped inside, his eyes doing another quick inventory of the house. He noticed the new book on the side table, the toolbox back in its proper place by the basement door, the signs of a life being actively lived, not just endured. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd pored over the damning bank statements just months before. The sunlight streamed through the clean window. The silence was awkward, but not hostile. "How's the apartment?" I asked, pouring the coffee. "It's small," he said with a wry smile. "Quiet. I can hear my neighbor's television. But it's mine. The rent is manageable. I don't have to call anyone to ask for help to make it." The pride in that simple statement was palpable. We talked about nothing for a while. The weather, the Seahawks' dismal season, the city's plans to repave Main Street. It was the kind of inane, comfortable chatter we hadn't shared in years. We were two people relearning how to be in the same room without the specter of Isabella and her family between us.
Finally, he set his mug down. The clink against the saucer was decisive. I went to see a therapist, just a few times, after she left. I thought I was going because my marriage fell apart, but I was really going because I didn't like the man I'd become. I stayed quiet, letting him find the words. They let them change me, Dad. I wanted so badly to belong in their world that I let them convince me my own wasn't good enough. Our family, Mom's memory, you. I am so ashamed of that. Your mother, I said, my own throat tight, was the strongest, most dignified person I ever knew. She never measured her worth by someone else's yardstick. She wouldn't want you to either. He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I know. I'm starting to remember that. I'm starting to remember a lot of things I'd chosen to forget. We sat for a long moment, the past settling between us, not as a weapon, but as a shared history, a painful one, but ours. What about you? He asked. You seem good. I am, I said, and it was the truth. I'm fixing up the house, I'm talking to Rosa, I'm reading, I'm even thinking about taking a trip. Maybe see the Grand Canyon. Your mother always wanted to. A real smile, the first one I'd seen from him in years, broke across his face. She did. She'd like that. You should go. The coffee was gone. The croissants were eaten. He stood to leave. It had been a short visit, but it was enough. A foundation, however cracked, had been laid anew. Same time next week? He asked at the door, hope tentative in his voice. I'll have the coffee ready. I watched him walk to his car, an older sedan he'd bought to replace the luxury lease he'd lost. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The door was open. The path back, however long and difficult, was there.
The letter arrived a week later. The stationery was still expensive, but the crest at the top was different. A Portland address. It was from Catherine Jenkins. Her handwriting was a precise, sharp script, each word a carefully placed dagger. Dear Arthur, I trust this letter finds you well, though I suspect the satisfaction you derive is from the misery you have so deliberately inflicted upon our family. I am writing not for myself, but for my daughter. Isabella is devastated. The stress of the financial collapse you engineered, followed by the failure of her marriage, has taken a severe toll on her health. She is a shadow of her former self. You have achieved your goal. You have torn down everything we built. You have your revenge. I hope it sustains you in your lonely old age. However, your work is not quite complete. In your spiteful crusade, you failed to consider one thing: the joint credit card you co-signed for them years ago to establish their credit. An outstanding balance of $18,000 remains. The bank, of course, now holds you equally responsible. The first missed payment notice will arrive soon. Consider this the final price of your pettiness. I doubt even you can derive pleasure from bankrupting your own son along with yourself. Sincerely, Catherine Jenkins. I read it twice. The audacity was breathtaking. The blame was still squarely placed on me. The threat was veiled in concern for her daughter, and the final twist of the knife, the co-signed credit card. I'd forgotten about it entirely. It had been a small thing, a gesture of help when they were first starting out. I never used it. I never saw the statements. A cold anger, purer and sharper than any I'd felt before, washed over me. This was their last move, a final desperate attempt to drag me down with them. But I was not the man I had been. I did not rage. I did not panic. I went to my filing cabinet, to the green folder. I found the original co-signing agreement. Then I went to my computer. I didn't call the bank. I wrote an email. A detailed, factual, unemotional email to the bank's customer service department, with copies to the legal department and the office of the president. I stated that I was a co-signer on the account in question. I noted that the primary cardholders, Michael and Isabella Finch, were now separated and facing financial hardship. I did not mention the $18,000. Instead, I invoked my right, as per the agreement's Clause 7b, to formally freeze the account due to the divorce and financial instability of the primary users, preventing any further charges and protecting myself from future liability. I attached a copy of the agreement, highlighting the clause. I ended the email by stating that I was willing to discuss a payment plan for the existing balance, but only under the condition that the account was permanently closed and that the primary cardholders were pursued for the debt first, as was standard procedure. I hit send. Then I picked up the phone and called Michael. "The Nordstrom card, the one I co-signed for. There's an $18,000 balance. Your mother-in-law just wrote to inform me I'll be on the hook for it." A long, horrified silence. "Oh, God, Dad, I didn't know. Isabella, she must have... After I left?" His voice was thick with shame. "I'm so sorry. I'll call the bank. I've already handled it. The account is frozen. They can't charge another penny. The bank will be contacting you. The debt is in your and Isabella's names. It's your responsibility to settle it with her, not mine." The relief on his end was palpable. "Thank you. I'll figure it out. I'll get a second job. I'll pay it." "See that you do." Then I added, "And Michael, this is the last time. The very last time I clean up a mess you helped make. Understood?" "Yes, sir. Understood." I hung up. I looked at Catherine's elegant, hateful letter. I didn't burn it. I filed it away in the green folder. It was not a threat. It was a trophy. Proof that I had finally, definitively, won. Spring arrived in Spokane, not with a bang, but with a slow, gentle thaw. The snow receded, revealing stubborn patches of green. The air lost its biting edge, carrying instead the damp, fertile smell of earth waking up. My life had found a new, steady rhythm. Tuesdays were for breakfast at the diner. Thursdays, Michael came for coffee. We were careful with each other, respectful of the new, fragile bridge we were building. It was on one of these Thursdays that he brought the envelope. He held it awkwardly, as if it might burn him. "This came for you," he said, placing it on the kitchen table between us. "To my old address. The new owners forwarded it." The envelope was thick, expensive. The return address was a law firm in Portland. Jenkins, Whitmore, and Sterling. My old friends. I felt a weary sigh build in my chest. What now? Another threat? A lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress? I slid it open. Inside was not a threat. It was an invitation. Elegant, embossed script on heavy cardstock. "Mr. Cody Jenkins and Mrs. Catherine Jenkins request the honor of your presence at a dinner in honor of their daughter Isabella's engagement to Dr. Julian West. Saturday, the 18th of May at 7 o'clock in the evening, the Westmoreland Country Club, Portland, Oregon." I stared at it. Michael wouldn't meet my eyes, studying a chip in his coffee mug. "Engagement," I said flatly. "That was fast." He shrugged, a gesture of profound exhaustion. "I guess the suitable environment didn't take long to find. He's a cardiologist, older, divorced. From what I hear, his environment is very suitable." I let the card sit on the table, The arrogance was staggering. This wasn't an invitation. This was a declaration, a victory lap. It was Catherine's way of saying, "See, we landed on our feet. We're back on top. You failed to break us." It was also, I realized with cold clarity, a trap. They expected me to be angry, to be hurt, to perhaps even cause a scene if I were foolish enough to show up. They were baiting me. Michael finally looked at me. "You're not going to Doe, are you, Dad?" I picked up the invitation again. The Westmoreland Country Club. I could imagine it. Crystal, silver, the quiet clink of old money. Cody holding court, telling a sanitized version of the Spokane debacle, painting himself as the victim of an unstable former father-in-law. They would feast on the story. A slow smile spread across my face. It was not a pleasant smile. "Of course I'm going," I said. Michael's mug clattered against the saucer. "What? Why? Dad, it's a trap. They'll humiliate you." "No, son," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "They're expecting the old Arthur, the one who was easily baited, who wore his heart on his sleeve, who reacted with raw emotion. They're expecting a wounded bull to charge the red cape. But I'm not that man anymore. They created this new version of me, and this version knows how to fight their kind of war." I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes, followed by dread. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to accept their invitation. I'm going to buy a new suit, and I'm going to be the most charming, gracious, and congratulatory guest they have ever seen." I leaned forward. "They want a scene? I will give them silence. They want anger? I will give them a smile. They want to prove I'm a bitter old man? I will prove that I am utterly, completely, and totally unaffected by their existence. That is a far more devastating weapon than any truth bomb I could ever drop." I picked up my coffee. The greatest revenge is not to be like them. It's to be happy, and to let them see it. Michael was silent for a long time. "Are you really not angry?" "Oh, I'm angry," I admitted. "But I'm not going to let them use my anger against me anymore. My peace is too hard won to give up for their petty games." I looked at the invitation one last time before tossing it into the recycling bin. Let them have their doctor. Let them have their country club. We have coffee. And that, I knew, was worth infinitely more.
The plane touched down in Phoenix under a vast azure sky. The dry heat was a shock to my Spokane-conditioned system, but a welcome one. It felt like a cleanse. Rosa was there at the arrivals gate, her arms wide open, her smile as bright as the Arizona sun. She hugged me so tightly I grunted. "About time, you old fool," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Her grandkids, Maya and Leo, shyly presented me with a handmade welcome card. I felt a lump in my throat. This was family, uncomplicated, unconditional. A few days into my visit, we loaded into Rosa's SUV, a practical minivan, not a status symbol, and drove north. The kids chattered in the back, playing games on a tablet. Rosa and I talked about everything and nothing. The desert landscape unfolded around us, stark and beautiful. We reached the south rim of the Grand Canyon in the late afternoon. The kids, bored from the drive, scrambled out of the car with minimal interest. But as we walked toward the edge, their chatter died down. Leo's hand, without him even realizing it, found mine. And then we saw it. The world fell away into a breathtaking, unimaginable vastness. Layers of rock, painted in a million shades of red and orange and gold, stretched out to a horizon that seemed to go on forever. The silence was profound, broken only by the wind and the gasp of my own breath. Maria would have loved this. The thought didn't bring the sharp pain it once had. It brought a warm, steady presence. She was here with me, in the awe, in the grandeur, in the sheer scale of a world that made all our human dramas seem so small, so temporary. Maya looked up at me, her small face serious. "It's really big, Uncle Arthur." I squeezed her hand. "Yes, sweetheart, it is. It makes our problems look pretty small, doesn't it?" She nodded, her eyes wide. I stood there for a long time, just looking. I thought about the green folder sitting in my filing cabinet at home. I thought about the foreclosure notice, the lawyer's letter, the newspaper article. I thought about Cody and Catherine Jenkins already plotting their next move in their tiny gilded world. It all seemed so insignificant against the timeless witness of this canyon. The sun began to set, setting the canyon walls on fire. It was the most spectacular thing I had ever seen. I didn't take a picture. I just watched. I absorbed it. I let the immense, silent beauty of it wash over me and through me, scouring away the last remnants of bitterness. The war was over. I had not just won, I had moved beyond the battlefield entirely. On the drive back to Phoenix, with the kids asleep in the back, Rosa glanced over at me. "You're quiet." "I'm good, Rosie," I said, and I truly meant it. I'm finally good. I looked out the window at the darkening desert. The past was behind me. The future was a wide open road, stretching out under a sky full of stars. I was Arthur Finch. I was 65 years old, and my life, my real life, was just beginning.
Back in Spokane, the Portland Invitation waited. It sat on my kitchen counter, a pristine white rectangle of pure provocation. I didn't recycle it. I used it as a coaster for my coffee mug, a small, satisfying act of defiance that made me smile each morning. The Westmoreland Country Club, May 18th. I had a month. I knew my plan required a specific uniform. The old Navy suit from the funeral in the Christmas confrontation wouldn't do. That suit was a shield, a suit of armor. For this, I needed something else, a weapon of subtlety. I drove downtown to a men's haberdashery that had been in business since my father's time. The bell on the door chimed softly. The air smelled of wool and cedar. An older gentleman with a tape measure around his neck and kind eyes looked up from a ledger. "Mr. Finch," he said with a nod of recognition. "Haven't seen you in some time." "Need a new suit, Samuel," I said. "Something contemporary." "Contemporary, is it? Special occasion?" "A party in Portland," I said, a faint smile on my lips. "I intend to be the best-dressed man there." He took my measurements with efficient, practiced hands. "The cut is different now, Arthur. Not so boxy. Lets the fabric do the work." He led me to a wall of swatches. I bypassed the safe navies and grays. My finger stopped on a bolt of fabric the color of a stormy sky, a deep, complex charcoal with a faint, almost imperceptible herringbone pattern. It was quiet, but it spoke of confidence. It was the antithesis of Toady Jenkins's loud, brash plaid blazers. "This one," I said. Samuel nodded his approval. "Excellent choice. A worsted wool. It will travel well. And for the shirt, white is always correct." "No," I said, "not white." I pointed to a swatch of pale, silvery blue. "This." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. He was a professional. For a tie, I chose a simple knit silk in a solid burgundy. No patterns, no logos, just rich, understated color. "You'll need shoes, of course," Samuel said. "Can't wear those old brogues with a suit like this." He was right. My old shoes were comfortable, but they were from another life. I bought a pair of sleek, cap-toe Oxfords in a dark brown that complemented the charcoal and burgundy perfectly. 2 weeks later, I went for the final fitting. I stood on the pedestal in front of the three-way mirror. Samuel helped me into the jacket. It settled on my shoulders not like a weight, but like a second skin. The fit was perfect, trim through the torso, the sleeves ending just at my wrist. It didn't hide my age, it respected it. I looked at my reflection. I didn't see a bitter old man. I saw someone composed, assured, and utterly at peace. The suit was my armor, but it was also my flag. "Well?" Samuel asked, brushing a piece of lint from the sleeve. "It'll do," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. The day before the dinner, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Are you really going through with it?" he asked, his voice laced with anxiety. I RSVP'd yes, didn't I? I don't want you to get hurt, Dad." "The only one who can hurt me tomorrow is me, son, and I have no intention of doing that. I'm not going to fight them. I'm going to bore them to death with my impeccable manners." He let out a short, nervous laugh. "What are you going to say to her? To Isabella?" "I'm going to wish her every happiness," I said, and I meant it. She gave me my son back, unintentionally, and at a high cost, but she did. For that, I can genuinely thank her. The line was quiet for a moment. "You're a better man than I am, Dad." "No," I said softly, "I'm just a man who has nothing left to prove to them. That's a very freeing place to be." I hung up and went to pack my new suit. I folded it carefully in my garment bag. I was ready, not for a battle, but for a performance. The curtain was about to rise on the final act of their little drama, and I intended to be the quiet, dignified, and utterly unforgettable star. The Westmoreland Country Club was exactly as I had imagined it. A sprawling edifice of old money and older traditions, perched on a manicured cliffside overlooking the city. Valets whisked away German sedans and Italian sports cars. Men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns floated toward the entrance, their laughter sharp and brittle in the cool evening air. I stepped out of my modest rental car, handing the keys to a young valet who tried to hide his surprise. In my storm-gray herringbone suit, I knew I didn't look like I belonged to this world, but for the first time, I looked like I could effortlessly inhabit its edges. The entrance hall was a cavern of crystal chandeliers and murmured conversations. I saw them immediately. They were holding court near a grand fireplace, a triumvirate of restored glory. Cody, red-faced and beaming, clapping a well-dressed man on the back, the cardiologist, Dr. Julian West, I presumed. Catherine, resplendent in navy silk, her smile a masterpiece of surgical precision. And Isabella. She was thinner, her beauty harder, more polished, like a diamond cut for maximum coldness. She clung to the doctor's arm, her laugh a little too loud. Then she saw me. Her smile didn't falter, it froze. The light in her eyes didn't dim, it sharpened into pure, undiluted shock. Cody followed her gaze. His bonhomie vanished, replaced with a flush of anger he couldn't quite conceal. Catherine's hand tightened on her champagne flute. I didn't approach. I simply accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and took a slow sip, meeting their stares with a small, polite, and utterly unreadable smile. It was Julian West who broke the standoff. Mistaking my presence for that of a welcomed guest, he led Isabella toward me. "Darling, aren't you going to introduce me?" he said, his voice a smooth, confident baritone. Isabella was trapped. "Julian, this is Arthur Finch, Michael's father." The name tasted like ash in her mouth. Julian's smile was professionally warm. "Ah, Arthur, a pleasure. Isabella has spoken of you." The hesitation was microscopic, but it was there. "The pleasure is mine, Doctor," I said, shaking his hand. My grip was firm, my tone genial. "Congratulations to you both. I wish you every happiness." The words, so simple and sincere, disarmed them completely. They were braced for a fight, for a scene. They were not prepared for brace. "Thank you," Julian said, visibly relieved. "That's very kind." "Not at all," I said. I turned my gaze to Isabella. "You look well, Isabella." She stared at me, her eyes searching mine for mockery, for bitterness. She found none. Only a calm, distant politeness that was more unnerving than any insult. "Thank you, Arthur," she managed, her voice tight. Cody and Catherine descended then, their smiles strained. "Finch," Cody said, the single word a concession and a warning. "Cody! Catherine! Lovely event!" I gestured with my glass to the opulent room. "You've certainly landed on your feet. It's admirable." The barb, wrapped in a compliment, hit its mark. Catherine's smile tightened. "One does what one must to protect one's family." "Of course," I agreed amiably. "Family is everything." An awkward silence fell. I had given them nothing. No anger to dissect, no pain to feast upon. I was a black hole of placid courtesy, absorbing their hostility and reflecting back nothing but a faint, bemused light. "Well," I said, finishing my champagne, "I won't monopolize the happy couple's time. Congratulations again." I gave a slight, formal nod and turned away. I felt their stares on my back like laser sights, but I didn't look back. I moved through the crowd, an island of quiet in a sea of noise. I exchanged pleasantries with a few people who looked vaguely familiar, never lingering. I had done what I came to do. I left before dinner was served. The valet brought my car around, and as I drove away from the glittering lights of the club, descending from their rarefied air back to the solid earth, I felt it. Not victory, not revenge. I felt free. The final thread of their hold on me had been severed not by a confrontation, but by a handshake. The last word had not been shouted, it had been whispered in a blessing they never deserved. And it was mine. I drove toward the airport, toward home. The past was finally, completely behind me. The road ahead was my own.